UK students who killed. Real school-age murder cases. Welcome to UK Real Crime, where real crimes meet real justice. Today we uncover Britain's youngest killers, students who traded textbooks for weapons and turned classrooms into crime scenes. Times you hear their stories, you'll never see the school gates the same way again. Number 1. Scarlett Jenkinson and Eddie Ratcliffe. In the quiet village of Colchester, Cheshire, a February afternoon in 2023 began like any other. By evening, the community would be gripped by the details of one of the most disturbing murders in recent UK history. Scarlett Jenkinson and Eddie Ratcliffe, both 15, had spent months plotting the killing of their schoolmate, 16-year-old Brianna Gay. To Brianna, Scarlett was a friend. To Scarlett, Brianna was a name on a handwritten kill list. Investigators later revealed that Jenkinson harbored a fascination with violence, finding it sexually arousing, and had previously attempted to poison another pupil. Ratcliffe, influenced by transphobic hostility and his allegiance to Jenkinson, agreed to help. On 11 February, they lured Brianna to Linear Park under the pretense of meeting. The secluded spot was carefully chosen, hidden from public view, yet close enough to escape quickly. Carrying a hunting knife, they attacked with ferocious speed. Brianna was stabbed 28 times in the head, neck, chest, and back. The assault was described in court as sadistic and exceptionally brutal. Afterward, Jenkinson deleted incriminating messages, returned home to play video games, and even posted a tribute to Brianna on Snapchat. Police investigations moved quickly. A search of Jenkinson's bedroom uncovered the murder plan in her handwriting, as well as evidence of her browsing the dark web to watch torture videos. Ratcliffe's involvement was confirmed through messages and witness accounts. Both tried to blame each other, but forensic evidence and Jenkinson's later psychiatric admission confirmed their shared role. At Manchester Crown Court, the judge called their actions premeditated, planned, and driven by warped motivations. Jenkinson received a life sentence with a minimum term of 22 years, Ratcliffe a minimum of 20. In the dock, Jenkinson stared forward expressionless, while Ratcliffe avoided eye contact, hands clenched. The court heard how transphobia and a lust for violence had combined to take a young life. Brianna's parents spoke of their devastation. Her father called the killers pure evil and said they should never be released. Her mother, who had initially urged compassion for the offenders' families, admitted that any sympathy disappeared after seeing the lack of remorse. Public outrage was swift, with calls for action on knife crime and the dangers of violent online content. The judge's decision to lift their anonymity was rare, made in the strong public interest to spur debate. This case warns us that danger can hide in the people closest to us. A friendly face can mask intentions shaped by prejudice, obsession, or cruelty. Awareness of behavioral red flags, fascination with violence, manipulative relationships, or targeting of others for who they are is essential for safety. The digital world, too, can distort reality, feeding dangerous fantasies until they spill into the physical. And when a knife enters young hands, the margin for intervention narrows to nothing. Protecting each other begins with recognizing when friendship turns into threat. Number 2. Bardia Shojaeifard. In the late afternoon, calm outside St Margaret's Primary School in Horsforth, Leeds, dozens of parents waited for their children. Among the crowd, 2 boys crossed paths for the last time. 14-year-old Bardia Shojaeifard had carried a 13-centimeter kitchen knife from home all day. The target, prosecutors would later say, was clear: 15-year-old Alfie Lewis, a schoolmate with whom he had past disputes. Their history was petty but heated: a shove during a quarrel over a girl, a Halloween confrontation involving fireworks. On November 7, 2023, Shojaeifard chose to end it violently. As pupils spilled from the school gates, witnesses saw Alfie step back, hands raised slightly, saying, "Chill out, what are you doing?" Shojaeifard lunged. The blade drove 14 centimeters into Alfie's chest, puncturing his heart, then slashed his leg. Children screamed. Parents froze. Alfie collapsed on the road, and though emergency crews arrived quickly, he was pronounced dead at hospital. Shojaeifard fled, discarding the bloodied knife nearby. Within an hour, police arrested him at home. Forensic teams matched the weapon to a set in his kitchen and confirmed Alfie's blood on his clothes. Photographs from Shojaeifard's phone revealed a fascination with blades, even edited images of knives in his own hands. At Leeds Crown Court, the prosecution called the killing premeditated and planned, using murderous violence to end a young life. Shojaeifard denied murder, claiming self-defense, but every witness described Alfie as non-aggressive. The jury took little time to return a unanimous guilty verdict. On June 21, 2024, now aged 15, Shojaeifard stood in the dock for sentencing. Dressed in a dark suit, head slightly bowed, he avoided the gaze of Alfie's family. Mr. Justice Cotter delivered a life sentence with a minimum term of 13 years, condemning the worrying interest in knives that drove the crime. Without that obsession, he said, Alfie would be here today. From the public gallery, Alfie's mother, Heather Lane, addressed him directly. No sentence will ever be enough for what you have done. Alfie was my heart, and when he was stabbed in the heart, it killed me too. His older brother called Alfie a loving and caring little mate, while his aunt spoke of their grandmother's wish to swap places with him. Outside court, the family called knife crime an epidemic and voiced disappointment with the sentence, saying nothing could return their boy. Alfie's death is a reminder that carrying a knife offers no protection, only the certainty of irreversible damage when tempers flare. Disputes among young people, however trivial, can ignite into lethal violence in seconds. A fascination with weapons, whether online or in person, is never harmless curiosity. It is a sign that must be confronted, and silence in the face of threats or troubling behavior leaves space for tragedy to grow. These are not warnings from a distant world, but from the pavements we walk every day. Number 3. Chaz Corrigan. On a quiet summer night in Cambridge, the hum of the city was broken by a scene that would ripple far beyond its cobbled streets. Mohammed Yusuf Al-Qasim, a 20-year-old Saudi student, was walking near Mill Park just steps from his accommodation. Without warning, he was approached by 21-year-old Chaz Corrigan. Witnesses say there was no argument, no exchange, only sudden violence. Corrigan, armed with a knife described in court as typically linked to homicides, drove the blade into Al-Qasim's neck. The wound, 11.5 cm deep, severed his jugular vein. Passing doctors attempted to save him, but the injury was fatal. Police arrived within minutes, finding Corrigan nearby. A 50-year-old man was also arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender, and a third suspect remains at large. Prosecutors allege Corrigan acted with clear intent to kill, calling it an unprovoked attack. Defense lawyers claim self-defense, though no prior contact between the two men has been established. In Peterborough Magistrates' Court, Corrigan appeared calm, dressed plainly, his eyes fixed on the bench. He was remanded to Cambridge Crown Court for trial, facing charges of murder and possession of a knife in a public place. The Saudi embassy in London is working closely with UK authorities, while Al-Qasim's family has flown in to repatriate his body. We will pursue justice until the perpetrator is held fully accountable, his uncle, Majed Abulkhail, told reporters. In Saudi Arabia, thousands attended Al-Qasim's funeral in Makkah. Friends described him as ambitious, kind, and full of life, recalling his volunteer work serving pilgrims during Hajj. On social media, tributes poured in, and in Cambridge, students spoke of a shaken sense of safety. Knife crime is something we hear about in London, one said, but not here. The trial is set for February 2026, with a preliminary hearing on September 8. Until then, Corrigan remains in custody. The case has reignited debates in the UK about knife crime, public safety, and the vulnerability of international students. From this tragedy, the first truth is that violence can find us even in places we believe to be safe. Awareness of our surroundings is not paranoia, it is self-preservation. Acting quickly in the face of danger, by calling emergency services or seeking help, can mean the difference between survival and loss. And communities that remain vigilant, noticing and reporting suspicious behavior, become stronger shields against random acts of harm. These lessons, drawn in grief, are the tools that may prevent another life from being cut short without warning. Number 4. Aaron Campbell. In the early hours of a summer morning on the Isle of Bute, a shadow moved silently through the streets. By the time the sun rose, a small community would be confronted with unimaginable horror. 6-year-old Alessia MacPhail had been sleeping in her bed at her father's home. Aaron Campbell, 16 at the time, knew the household through small drug transactions with Alessia's father and his girlfriend. That night, driven by violent fantasies he later described as entertaining and satisfying, Campbell abducted the child. CCTV captured his outline carrying her along the shoreline. Hours later, her body was found in woodland near a derelict hotel. She had suffered 117 injuries, including catastrophic wounds inflicted while she was still alive. The pathologist described them as the most severe he had ever seen. DNA evidence left no doubt. Campbell's profile was on 14 areas of Alicia's body and clothing. When questioned, Campbell denied involvement, lodging a false claim that his victim's father's girlfriend was responsible. In court, prosecutors branded him a confident liar. Jurors unanimously convicted him in February 2019 of rape, murder, and abduction. At sentencing in March 2019, the judge called him cold, callous, calculating, remorseless, and dangerous. Campbell stood motionless, eyes fixed ahead, showing no reaction as he was handed a life sentence with a minimum term of 27 years. He later appealed, securing a reduction to 24 years, a decision that outraged Alicia's family. Her uncle called it playing the system, and her mother said she hoped he was suffering and vowed to confront him in prison. The case resonated far beyond the courtroom. The judge lifted Campbell's anonymity, a rare move for an under-18, citing strong public interest. On the Isle of Bute, residents began locking their doors for the first time. Online, he became one of Scotland's most despised inmates, with his name circulating on social media well before official release. Alicia's murder is a stark reminder that evil intentions often grow quietly over time, waiting for the right moment to strike. Recognizing patterns of cruelty, obsession with violent fantasies, or inappropriate behavior toward others can be life-saving. No community is immune to predation, no matter how safe it feels. And the anonymity once granted to protect young offenders should never become a shield for those who commit deliberate, sadistic harm. Safety depends on vigilance, not only from authorities, but from neighbors, families, and friends willing to speak up. Number 5. Kim Edwards and Lucas Markham. In the Lincolnshire market town of Spalding, the events of one April night in 2016 would etch themselves into the country's criminal history as a case without parallel. Kim Edwards, just 14 years old, harbored a simmering resentment toward her mother, Elizabeth, and a bitter jealousy toward her 13-year-old sister, Katie. Her boyfriend, Lucas Markham, shared her animosity, particularly toward Elizabeth, who had tried to break up their relationship. Over weeks, the pair shaped a murder plan with chilling precision, discussing the method, the cleanup, even what they would eat afterward. On the night of April 13, Kim let Lucas in through the bathroom window. He carried 4 kitchen knives. The first target was Elizabeth. While she slept, Lucas stabbed her 8 times and smothered her with a pillow. Kim listened from the doorway, later recalling the sound of her mother's struggling and gurgling. Then Lucas entered Katie's room. Kim claimed she could not do it herself, so Lucas stabbed the girl through the neck and suffocated her as she begged for her life. What followed was grotesque in its ordinariness. They bathed together to wash away the blood, ate tea cakes and ice cream, and watched twilight. They stayed in the house with the bodies for 36 hours before police, acting on a missing person report, discovered the scene. Asked where her mother was, Kim said simply, "Upstairs." Lucas added, "Why don't you go and look?" The trial at Nottingham Crown Court revealed the full scope of their planning. Edwards' own words to police, that she was glad her mother was dead and that she deserved it, and her indifference in the dock cemented her image as the driver behind the killings. Lucas admitted murder. Kim's plea of diminished responsibility was rejected. Both were convicted and handed life sentences with minimum terms of 20 years, later reduced on appeal to 17 and a half. In court, the family's grief was raw. Graham Greene, Elizabeth's partner, compared Kim to Myra Hindley and insisted she should never be let out. Katie's father, Peter Edwards, purchased the grave next to his daughter's, saying he could not wait to lay in it. The public learned their names after the Court of Appeal lifted their anonymity, calling it overwhelmingly in the public interest. The murders in Spalding show how violence can grow in the shadows of a family home. Resentment left unchecked, reinforced by a partner who encourages dangerous thinking, can spiral into calculated harm. Emotional isolation in teenagers can warp judgment, making acts once unthinkable seem acceptable. And the absence of remorse in such young offenders should push us toward earlier intervention, not just punishment after the fact. Protecting lives starts with honest conversations about conflict, trust, and the warning signs that love has turned into something far darker. Number 6. James Fairweather. In the quiet town of Colchester, 2 lives ended in the most savage fashion, and the hunt for their killer would reveal a teenager with a fascination for murder. James Fairweather was just 15 when, in March 2014, he encountered James Atfield, lying drunk in Castle Park. Without warning, Fairweather stabbed him more than 100 times, leaving him to bleed to death. 3 months later, he struck again. Nahid Al-Manea, a Saudi student, was walking along Salary Brook Trail when Fairweather ambushed her, stabbing her in the abdomen before driving the knife into her eyes and brain. She died where she fell. At first, police believed the two murders were unrelated. One was thought to be a random frenzy, the other a possible hate crime. Fairweather, already known to police for a knife-point robbery, was questioned but released after giving what seemed like a plausible alibi. It took nearly a year before a dog walker spotted him, hiding in bushes near the scene of the second killing, wearing gloves and armed with a knife. Police moved quickly. Under interview, Fairweather confessed to both murders, claiming voices urged him to kill and that he had been hunting a third victim when caught. Investigators discovered his obsession with notorious serial killers, photos of Peter Sutcliffe, Myra Hindley and Ted Bundy on his phone, and fantasies about killing teachers, his parents and strangers. In April 2016, a jury at Guildford Crown Court rejected his claims of psychosis. A psychiatrist described his account of hallucinations as cliched and more like something you might see in a horror film. The judge at the Old Bailey called the murders brutal and sadistic, sentencing him to life with a minimum term of 27 years. Fairweather stood impassive, his expression betraying neither remorse nor fear, as victim family members described him as a monster and pure evil. His appeal failed. The killings shocked Colchester, a community unaccustomed to such violence. For months, fear lingered, locals kept to well-lit areas, and parents warned children not to walk alone. For Nahi's family, her murder cut short a promising academic future. For James Atfield's mother, the loss of her brain-injured but kind and brave son remains an open wound. Colchester learnt the hard way that random violence is not truly random, it follows patterns of obsession and escalation. Early signs of fixation on weapons or notorious killers demand action, not dismissal. Communities must take smaller crimes seriously because they are often precursors to greater harm. An awareness of one's surroundings, even in familiar parks and streets, is a quiet but powerful shield. The murders of James Atfield and Nahid Al-Mania remind us that danger thrives when we stop paying attention to what is already in plain sight. Number 7. William Cornick. In April 2014, the corridors of Corpus Christi Catholic College in Leeds would witness a tragedy that shook Britain's education system to its core. William Cornick, 15 at the time, had harbored an intense resentment toward his Spanish teacher, Anne Maguire, since year 8. The animosity deepened when she banned him from a school trip for incomplete homework. From then, he spoke openly to friends about killing her, kept a kill list of staff, and even shared on Facebook his plans to brutally attack her. On April 28, 2014, during a Spanish lesson, Cornick revealed an 8-inch kitchen knife to a classmate and calmly stated, "I'm going to kill Miss Maguire." Moments later, as Mrs. Maguire leaned over a desk helping another pupil, he stabbed her repeatedly in the neck and back. She fled toward a colleague, gasping, "He's stabbed me in the neck," before being pulled into a workroom for safety. Cornick stood outside, expressionless, then returned to class, telling others good times and lamenting she wasn't dead. He had even brought whiskey to celebrate. Staff quickly restrained him. Under arrest, Cornick showed no remorse, telling psychiatrists, "I wasn't in shock, I was happy. I still am." Investigators discovered his fascination with serial killers, ultra-violent video games, and his long-standing fantasy of killing a teacher in front of peers. At Leeds Crown Court, the prosecution highlighted the calculated nature of the attack. The judge called it truly grotesque and brutal and sadistic, noting his total and chilling lack of remorse. Diagnosed with a personality disorder and marked psychopathic traits, Cornick was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 20 years. As he listened to the verdict, he remained still, his eyes fixed forward, betraying no emotion. Anne Maguire's widower, Dawn, described the killing as a monumental act of cowardice and evil that left the family's dreams gone forever. Her sisters spoke of unbearable grief and anger, feeling they had failed to protect their baby sister. The community's shock turned into a national debate on youth sentencing after a campaign group argued his term was too long compared to other European nations. Anne Maguire's death teaches us that persistent threats should never be dismissed as empty words. Students who voice violent fantasies, especially those tied to specific targets, require urgent intervention. Even in trusted environments like schools, safety relies on awareness and swift response to warning signs, and fascination with violence, whether through media or personal writings, is not harmless self-expression when coupled with clear intent. Murder is not only the loss of a dedicated teacher, but a lesson that prevention is always worth the discomfort of acting early. The murder of Anne Maguire remains a stark reminder that violence can erupt even in the most trusted spaces, and that the line between thought and action is shorter than many believe. In remembering her, the call is not only for justice, but for a renewed commitment to prevention. Number 8. Bailey Gwynne. October 28, 2015, began like any other school day at Cults Academy in Aberdeen, until a trivial dispute over biscuits spiraled into a deadly confrontation that stunned Scotland. Daniel Stroud, 16, had long been known for showing off knives and knuckle dusters to classmates. That day, during the lunch break, he asked fellow pupil Bailey Gwynne for another biscuit. Bailey refused, joking about Stroud's weight. Stroud shot back with a comment about Bailey's mother. Moments later, the disagreement escalated to a scuffle. Witnesses recalled Bailey holding Stroud in a headlock when Stroud reached into his pocket, pulled out a knife he had bought online and plunged it once into Bailey's chest, the blade piercing his heart. A teacher separated them and began escorting both boys toward the head teacher's office. Less than a minute later, Bailey collapsed from catastrophic blood loss. Despite immediate aid from staff, pupils and paramedics, he died shortly after arriving at Aberdeen Royal Infirmary. When police arrived, Straub was distressed and crying, asking, "Is he dead?" It was just a moment of anger. He directed officers to a bin where the knife was recovered. Forensic analysis later uncovered troubling internet searches on his laptop, including "How to get rid of someone annoying" and "Illegal Knives, UK," showing premeditation despite his claim the act was spontaneous. At the High Court in Aberdeen, prosecutors detailed Stroud's pattern of bringing weapons to school. The jury rejected a murder conviction but found him guilty of culpable homicide and carrying offensive weapons. Lady Stacey, sentencing him to 9 years in a young offenders institution with 2 years supervision, stated, "Had you not carried a knife, this fight would have ended in bruises, not in the loss of a life." Bailey's family described their beloved boy as someone who never failed to make us smile, adding, "Nothing will give us back what has been taken." Hundreds attended a candle-lit vigil and tributes flooded social media. Scotland's First Minister expressed shock and sadness, and an independent review followed, recommending new powers for teachers to search pupils suspected of carrying weapons. The killing of Bailey Gwynne shows how quickly minor disputes can escalate beyond control when a knife is within reach. Carrying a weapon to school, no matter the reason, turns every argument into a potential tragedy. Signs of weapon possession should be treated seriously, even if shown off casually among friends. And conversations about conflict resolution must begin early, before pride and provocation replace reason. Bailey's loss urges us to act decisively, because the line between everyday disagreement and irreversible harm is frighteningly thin. Number 9. Joshua Davies. Some crimes defy reason, leaving only a trail of cold calculation and lives shattered beyond repair. In a small South Wales town, one teenage boy's deception would end in an act of extraordinary cruelty. Joshua Davies was just 15 when he lured his ex-girlfriend, Rebecca Aylward, to a wooded area near his home in Aberconfig. To Rebecca's family, Davies was the polite young man they had welcomed into their home. But behind that facade, he had spent months telling friends about ways he might kill her, from poisoning to pushing her over a quarry. One friend, in a grotesque display of bravado, even promised him a free fried bread. 2 days before the murder in October 2010, Davies texted that friend, "Don't say anything, but you may just owe me a breakfast." On the morning of the meeting, Rebecca dressed in a new outfit, excited at the possibility of rekindling their relationship. Before leaving, Davies told another friend, "The time has come." In the secluded woods, Davies first tried to break Rebecca's neck. When that failed, he picked up a rock the size of a rugby ball and struck her repeatedly in the head until her skull gave way. He left her body face down among the leaves, then went to his aunt's house, posting on Facebook about chilling with friends, and later bragging, "I enjoyed a rather good day and a lovely breakfast." When police began investigating Rebecca's disappearance, Davies played the part of a concerned friend, even sending her messages he knew she'd never read. But the online messages, witness testimony, and the sheer weight of his premeditation unraveled his lies. At Swansea Crown Court, the jury heard how he had taken another friend to view the body and how he later boasted that the worst part was feeling her skull give way. He denied murder, blaming a friend instead, but the jury found him guilty by a 10-2 majority. Mr. Justice David Lloyd Jones called him devious, calculating and controlling, sentencing him to life with a minimum term of 14 years. Rebecca's mother, Sonia Oatley, described the act as senseless and barbaric and vowed Davies would never walk free. He will kill again if he's freed. The case drew national attention, fueling debates on juvenile sentencing, the influence of violent online culture, and whether life should mean life. Rebecca's murder reveals the danger of ignoring threats disguised as jokes. When someone speaks repeatedly about harming another, even in jest, it is a warning that should not be dismissed. Manipulation often hides behind charm, making it harder to believe harm is possible until it is too late, and the influence of peers, whether through encouragement or bets, can embolden cruelty. Recognizing and challenging these dynamics, both in person and online, is key to preventing lives from being lost to calculated malice. Rebecca's life was worth infinitely more than a bet, a breakfast, or a moment of adolescent ego. And her story forces us to ask, what kind of society do we become if we ignore the danger hiding in plain sight? Number 10. Daniel Bartlam. Some acts of violence feel almost scripted, yet the horror lies in their reality. In Nottingham, 14-year-old Daniel Bartlam transformed a fantasy into a calculated killing that shocked Britain. Bartlam lived with his mother, Jacqueline, and younger brother. Outwardly, he was a quiet teenager, but his private world was steeped in violent films, graphic video games, and disturbing online content. He idolized fictional killers, particularly one from Coronation Street, who attacked with a hammer, and even wrote stories depicting a murder of his mother, followed by a fire to hide the crime. Friends and family noticed his growing hostility, especially toward Jacqueline, but no one foresaw the brutality to come. In the early hours of April 21, 2011, while his mother slept, Bartlam retrieved a claw hammer and a can of petrol. Standing over her, he struck her head and face 7 times, killing her instantly. He rolled her body onto the floor, surrounded it with newspapers, doused them in petrol, and set them alight. Before fleeing with his younger brother, he planted another hammer to create the illusion of an intruder, then told neighbors a masked man had attacked his mother and escaped through the window. Forensic investigators quickly dismantled his story. A deleted document on his computer mirrored the killing in chilling detail. From the weapon to the fire, the hammer matched the fatal wounds, and no signs of forced entry were found. Bartlam eventually admitted to killing Jacqueline, but claimed it happened in the heat of an argument over missing trainers. Prosecutors at Nottingham Crown Court called it a grotesque and senseless act, meticulously planned and executed. During the trial, Bartlam showed little emotion, occasionally smirking, and once made a throat-slitting gesture toward Jacqueline's partner, Simon Mattis. The jury unanimously convicted him of murder in February 2012. The judge sentenced him to life with a minimum of 16 years, lifting reporting restrictions to reveal his identity due to the extraordinary nature of the crime. Jacqueline's family described her as a wonderful, loving and caring woman and rejected Bartlam's claims of abuse. Simon Mattis said he had no doubt the murder was planned over years and called Bartlam a very, very dangerous child. Public reaction was one of shock, with media coverage focusing on the disturbing influence of violent entertainment on young minds. Psychologists warned that Bartlam's case might not be the last linked to such influences. This case blurs the line between fantasy and reality, showing how violent media, when consumed without guidance, can feed dangerous ideas. Fixations on cruelty should never be waved away as harmless imagination, especially when they mirror specific real-world plans. Family members and teachers are often the first to see changes in mood, hostility, or obsession. Ignoring them risks letting a script of harm reach its final act. Jacqueline's death reminds us that prevention lies in addressing troubling behavior long before it finds a weapon. Jacqueline's death was not the work of an enraged moment. It was the product of a fantasy that grew unchecked. It leaves us asking, how do we draw the line between fiction and the point of no return? Number 11. Lorraine Thorpe. Some crimes leave entire communities stunned not only by their brutality but by the age of those who commit them. In Ipswich, 15-year-old Lorraine Thorpe's descent into violence would result in 2 murders over 9 days. Lorraine grew up amid instability. Her parents separated when she was 12, and she began living with her alcoholic father, often in squalid flats or makeshift shelters to avoid social services. By 13, she was absorbed into the street drinking culture of Ipswich, where she met 41-year-old Paul Clark, a domineering figure she would later call her role model. In August 2009, a dispute erupted after Clark's dog allegedly attacked a child. The argument with 41-year-old Rosalind Hunt, a fellow drinker, and Clark's former partner, escalated into days of torture. Together, Thorpe and Clark lured Rosalind to a flat, subjecting her to relentless assaults, kicking, punching, stamping on her head, breaking 9 ribs, burning her hair, whipping her with the dog lead and grating her skin before rubbing salt into the wounds. On August 9, police found Rosalind dead from multiple injuries. Fearing her father, 43-year-old Desmond Thorpe, would alert police, Lorraine and Clark turned on him the next day. She smothered her disabled father with a cushion and kicked him as he lay on the floor, later admitting her trainer prints would be found on his head. His body was discovered hours after Rosalind's. Investigators swiftly linked the killings. Both suspects denied involvement, but forensic evidence, witness testimony, and the sheer sequence of events painted a clear picture. In August 2010, after a 7-week trial at Ipswich Crown Court, a jury convicted Thorpe by a 10-2 majority. At sentencing in April 2012, Mr. Justice Sweeney described her as stubborn, willful, highly manipulative, and emphasized that she had gloried in the violence. She was given life with a minimum of 14 years. In court, Thorpe often sat smirking, exchanging laughs with Clark. Rosalind's brother Adrian Provins said he was disgusted by her behavior, calling it a big joke to her. The crimes were covered extensively in UK true crime media, sparking discussions about the dangers of street drinking subcultures and the capacity for extreme violence in youth. Dr. Kerry Nixon, a consultant forensic psychologist, remarked she had never seen this level of violence enacted by a 15-year-old girl. Lorraine's crimes show how a toxic environment can accelerate moral collapse in vulnerable youth. Prolonged exposure to violence, neglect, and dominant negative influences can normalize cruelty until killing becomes possible. Early intervention in chaotic home lives is not just welfare, it is crime prevention, and relationships that give young people power over the vulnerable should be monitored closely, for they can become breeding grounds for abuse. The path from neglect to murder is shorter than we like to believe, and its warning signs are often visible. Lorraine Thorpe's story forces an uncomfortable question. How far can neglect and destructive influence shape a child before they become someone capable of taking life twice in just over a week? Number 12. Brendan Harris and Ryan Herbert. In the early hours of August 11, 2007, a quiet park in Bartlam, Lancashire, became the scene of a crime so vicious it would change how the UK viewed violence against subcultures. Brendan Harris, 15, and Ryan Herbert, 16, had been drinking heavily, 4 pints of strong cider and schnapps, with friends when they encountered 20-year-old Sophie Lancaster and her boyfriend, 21-year-old Robert Maltby. The couple's gothic appearance caught the group's attention. Without provocation, Harris launched a flying kick at Robert's head, knocking him to the ground as Sophie knelt to protect her partner, begging them to stop. Both Harris and Herbert turned their fury on her. Witnesses described them kicking her head like a football and jumping up and down on her head. The attackers left Sophie and Robert for dead, later bragging to friends about the assault. When paramedics arrived, the couple's injuries were so severe that their genders couldn't be determined at first glance. Robert survived with lasting injuries and memory loss. Sophie never regained consciousness and died 13 days later, her mother recalling her neck as black, shiny, and crinkly like a bin bag. Police quickly identified Harris and Herbert. Covert recordings captured them discussing the attack in chilling detail. Herbert admitted his role. Harris denied murder, but was found guilty after trial. In April 2008, both were sentenced to life, Harris with a minimum term of 18 years, Herbert with 16 years and 3 months. The judge called it feral thuggery that degrades humanity itself. Public reaction was swift. Sophie's mother, Sylvia, campaigned to have attacks on alternative subcultures recognized as hate crimes, a move later adopted by Greater Manchester Police. The murder became a rallying point for conversations about youth violence, alcohol abuse, and prejudice based on appearance. In the years that followed, Herbert's sentence was reduced twice for exceptional progress, and he is now set for release. Harris remains imprisoned, having shown little sign of rehabilitation and even attacking a nurse while in custody. Sylvia Lancaster condemned Herbert's release, saying, "When do we finish doing our time?" and voicing that a life sentence should mean life. The Sophie Lancaster case is a sobering reminder that intolerance toward difference can turn lethal. Violence fueled by prejudice is not just a personal failing, it is a societal wound. Alcohol and group mentality can strip away empathy, leaving cruelty unrestrained. And early violent behavior, no matter how minor, is a signal to act before escalation. Sophie's death challenges us to confront bias, protect those who stand out, and remember that respect for difference is not optional. It is the foundation of a safe community. These cases show just how chillingly close danger can lurk in classrooms, hallways, and playgrounds. The faces may be young, but the crimes are unforgettable, and behind every headline lies another story waiting to be uncovered. What drives a student to cross that line from ordinary to unthinkable? We'll be diving deeper into more shocking UK real crime cases that you won't want to miss. Subscribe to UK Real Crime and hit the notification bell so you're the first to uncover the truth in our next investigation. The next case might be closer than you think.